Hi, good afternoon. It is 2 o'clock. We'll give everybody about 1 or 2 more minutes to join. As we're waiting, if you'll just put in the question box where you're joining us from today. We would love to see where everyone's joining us from today. I'm coming to you from Oklahoma. I had a few technical issues and had to restart my computer with 5 minutes till 2, but luckily we got everything up and running. So we're excited to be here with you today. So find that question box that's in your control panel. It's the orange rectangle with the white arrow. Open that one, find your questions, and just type in that question box where you're joining us from today. Looks like we have Leslie from Michigan, Tony from Cleveland, Mississippi. Thanks for joining us. We're so glad you're here today. We're going to take about 30 more seconds to let some additional people join us. It looks like we have some Texas. We have another Travis from Oklahoma, another Mississippi. We're so glad you're here. Glad you found that question box because we will be using it throughout the session today. Looks like we have a few more people that are jumping on right now, so we're going to let them jump on. We have Kansas. We have more Texas. So glad y'all joined us today. More Mississippi. Great. Thanks for being here today. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So first of all, welcome to Using Data to Inform Instruction and Ignite Learning. If you haven't been to one of our webinars before, be prepared to bring out your smartphone or smart device to interact with polls and questions. Be ready to share ideas in that question box where you just shared with us where you're joining from today. These sessions really rely on participation to be successful. So with that, let's jump right in. First, we're talking about data today. How do you use data in your classroom? So you can either scan that QR code, or there will be a link in the chat momentarily that you can click on and share with us how you currently use data in the classroom. I'll give you just a second to scan that QR code. Like always, we're using a tool called Mentimeter today. It is a free ed tech tool. It's great for polling, it has various question types, response types, but as always, check with your organization to make sure you can use it on your network and with your students. Let's jump over to see what some of our responses are today. How do you use data in your classroom? Let's see what our Mentimeter says. This is my students would tell me, wait for it, Miss Green, wait for it to pop up. I might turn my camera off just to make the bandwidth a little bit better. All right. So how are we using data in our classroom? To inform instruction? Absolutely. To see if students understand the content and reteaching efforts? Surely. Use data for attendance? Yes. Class student achievement? To assess the comprehension of my teaching by my students? Yes. To inform, adjust daily instruction? Absolutely. The reviewing the district common assessments? Yes. Those are all ways that we can use data in our classroom to kind of, you're seeing some themes, right? So we're looking at how it informs our instruction. We're looking to check for student understanding, all of those bits and pieces. We're going to jump back to the presentation. So today, we're going to identify ways we currently use data in the classroom, which we just started doing with that first activity. We're also going to examine 3 ways we can use data to inform instruction. And we're going to kind of look at the GW Ignite platform to see how that can be used to ignite learning as well. So first, I may talk more in this webinar than I have talked in any previous webinar, but let's kind of go through data right now. How can we collect data as instructors? So first, how do we gather this data from our students? One method could be observation. You can do it by watching your class. You can see how well students, both individually or in groups collectively, understand and interact with content. You can also decide whether there might need to be a review or modification of any components of your lesson. Second, polling the classroom. It's a great formative assessment strategy. It can be used not only to gather that formative data, but it can also help students learn how to justify their answers based on other data. And then also, there's more traditional methods such as official formative formal or formative assessments. These could also be tests, essays, pre-test, post-test, just to help demonstrate individual progress and kind of illustrate some trends in your classroom. So in the question box, tell us how you currently collect data in your classroom. So as you're teaching, what are some ways that you are collecting data, either before the lesson, during the lesson, or after the lesson? I will say when I first started teaching, the idea of pre-tests and post-tests really made sense to me, but that collecting data during the lesson seemed overwhelming as a new teacher. And I think as we evolve as teachers and educators and instructors, that kind of becomes second nature to us as well. But it looks like some people currently use informative and formative assessments in their classroom to collect that data. So looking at like those exit tickets. Some others use observations, yes, pre-test, post-test, quizzes, Kahoots, absolutely. All ways to gather and collect data in our classroom to help us understand what the students are learning, how well they're learning the material, and it also informs our instruction. Awesome. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, observation. Yep, observation's a popular one to collect data. Where else does data come from? You know, so in that traditional K-12 schooling, you have those cumulative files, you have standardized tests. In post-secondary, that may also look like some of those certification exams. So data can come to us from lots of places, not just inside the classroom, but sometimes outside the classroom. Then, how do we use this data to drive our instruction? So there's been some research done at LSU. I brought about these points. So first, how do we use the data to drive instructions? We have to kind of establish that colleague administrator buy-in, right? So showcasing the achievements of the school, that we're using student data to drive instruction. It really allows us as educators to see the benefits of adopting certain practices that we've put in place. Also, there's always those good professional development workshops or teacher trainings that provide opportunities for teachers to acquire new tools or ideas to help them collect and analyze data that then they can implement in their classroom. Also thinking about just those consistent check-ins and meetings, helping everyone stay on track and really drive towards that goal. What's another way that we can use data to drive instruction? Well, we can look at some of the data management tools, right? So leveraging some technology tools can really help you manage or track large amounts of data without feeling overwhelmed. There's a number of ed tech programs that will do this in a safely and a very clean manner. We're going to look at Ignite, which will do some of this for us in just a moment as well. Also, you can set those data points, right? So setting data points that you're going to track. So trying to avoid those pitfalls of gathering too much data, but also not collecting enough data. So discerning which topics are really going to be fundamental for your students to be successful, as well as what your subjects might require for graduation or certification exams are good data points to set as well. We can also think about not waiting until the end of a unit to track, but tracking that progress throughout. So like many of you mentioned, using pre-test and post-test, using observations in the middle to help inform instruction are great ways to kind of set those data points as you're tracking. Also, another idea that came about from this research was analyzing the data and identifying gaps and opportunities. This really helps show you which steps you have worked and where there's room for improvement. You know, you may find that students' test scores improve when they give tests earlier in the week instead of on Fridays. You might also have some insight that provides opportunities to optimize students' performance through a simple modification of an assessment. There's also data that reveals that students in a certain grade level are not reaching maybe their district standards, and it can help you uncover those gaps. So then you can work with those colleagues that teach students on other areas and other grade levels to make sure you fill in the gaps in the curriculum to help optimize student performance and student achievement. The fifth point that was brought about by this research on using data to really drive instruction was how do you turn data into action, right? We're so good at really pulling all this data together. And I know many of us as educators have sat in meetings where we have binders and files of different data to look at. And then we start looking at our standards and we're like, okay, so we can see where some gaps are, but then how do we take that and really transform it in our classroom? So using this data to help build lessons, really thinking about the student in mind and work on building those lessons backwards, because we're looking at improving any type of skill deficiency. We're also looking for understanding of which activities and teaching methods have been successful. And that can come from research. It can come from tracking what you're doing in the classroom to really understand which methods are most successful for your students. Because as you know, students are different every year. Also, thinking about how classes with lower overall test scores should receive maybe targeted support to help them meet their needs. And then the last point that we'll talk about briefly, because this is only a 30-minute webinar, it goes by real fast. Share those findings with other educators, right? So a lot of schools do have professional learning communities, PLCs, PLNs put into place. So collaboration is key for success when it comes to data-driven instruction. But also once you've collected it and analyzed it, made some modifications, made some tractor changes, really communicating that with your team, with administrators, with other educators. Really think about how educators can support each other and help each other illustrate what practices have worked and have been successful in building on those successes. Now, this may be the most you've ever heard me talk in a webinar, so we're going to keep going because we're going to jump into the fun part. So at GW, we do have a platform called Ignite. So we've developed to maybe look at vision or understanding of using data in the classroom. We kind of looked at how do we start to collect this data. And then we looked at, here's what research says about using this data to inform instruction. And now we're going to jump in and make it a little more practical and how we really use it as educators. So we kind of went from that theory side down to practical application. So with the Ignite platform, what you'll notice is all the resources, the reading material, the textbook, assessments have all been organized by the chapters. So as you can see, this is a display of the screen. We'll jump into the live platform in just a second, but it does have all the resources that you need and chapter by chapter materials, because as you know, it helps keep students organized. There's also an ebook that's in there, so you can use the ebook. It has many features in it. There are auto-graded assessments. As educators, we're always trying to gather and collect data and really use that data to inform our instruction. But sometimes there's just not enough time of the day because we all have family and other obligations outside of work. So there are ways that you can save time. I always say work smarter by using some auto-graded assessment features that do include pre-test and post-test, so you can measure growth inside of this platform. There's also video and animation quizzes. How many times, especially since 2020, have we assigned a video for our students to watch? And they all said they watched it, but then when you come to class and have that discussion about it, they can't tell you what happened to the video. So there are some videos and animations that do allow you to insert quizzes. So students get to kind of interact with the video, but answer questions along the way to check for understanding. It's also a really great way, not just to use it for assessment or to inform instruction, but it's a really great way just for students to interact with content and just check for understanding along the way. Of course, with any product, there's always going to be those teacher tools to help you manage your assignments. As you can see on the screen, it has the quizzes, a labeling activity. This was an example from a medical health science course. Then one of my favorite features is we have this robust reporting, which is what we're going to tie into our data today. And it really offers information and insight on students' scores. It provides how much time they spent on some activities, and it can also track against the course learning outcomes. So if you're looking for more of that mastery-based assessments, this can really help with that as well. But then my favorite feature, because I was one of those teachers who loved data, whenever I would get back any type of NWEA or standardized testing that had this information, I love to drill down quickly on my students and see which areas were they being successful at and which areas could I assist them in becoming more skillful at. So we're going to look at drilling down on some individual data. So we're going to just jump into the platform. We're going to talk about some data. We're going to look at some data. Hopefully this all works. because like I said, I had to log back, restart my computer with 5 minutes to go. So these are just some courses that I have. We're actually going to go up here to the top right and just look at the reports. Like I said, this is only a 30-minute webinar. It goes by really quickly. And I want to make sure that you have time to ask some questions. So start thinking about some questions that you have, and we'll be putting those in the question box in just a moment. We're going to look at my class. So within my course, you can see, okay, so this is my class, my classes. I can see in my intro to med term, it's mainly green. And according to up here, that means they're meeting expectations. So greater than or equal to 80%. My maintenance and light repair, there's some green, but then there's a whole lot of yellow. So they're approaching with 60 to 79%. And then I look at the culinary professional students, they're at 59% class average. There's some yellow and there's some red. So that tells me as an instructor, there's some work there for me to do to help students be successful. I can also click on details. So this is helping me collect data for my students. So I may have used class observation. I may have used a pre-test, post-test. I may have used activities like Kahoot to check for understanding or a different type of quizzes. I may have had students create some sort of podcast or slide presentation to show me what they're learning, but there may still be some areas that we could improve on. So as you can see, this is my first student. They have 93% right here on medical terminology. You can see that this one is all green. It will give me a breakdown too. So I can see that on chapter 1, on the pre-test, they made 100%. The class average was 93%. I'm going to go back. So I'm going to jump here. So that was my first student under detail. I can also look at this by class average, by student. Oops, there it goes. I can also then look at usage. So I can click on, we'll click on test student. We'll look at this individual student. Just a moment. There it goes. And it'll tell me how long they've actually been on this activity or assignment. So that can also help me determine what's going on with their performance, because we may notice some trends there. So it's always looking for those trends in your data. I'm going to go back. We can look at another one. Let's look at, just a moment. There it goes. It seems to be a little slow today. All right, let's close this one and let's go to the next course. Let's go down to culinary, where you'll notice some red. So once again, I can drill down on I have 3 students in this course. I have a class average. I can see how they're doing on the different activities. And then I can see, oh, so this is student 2. They have an 83% on chapter 4. And I can see whereas test student has a 50%. So this is also a chance to use maybe that peer tutoring concept with my students. So helping pair students to achieve. It's also thinking about how many opportunities do students have to take or retake a test or quiz. You can think about that in terms of improving students' data and scoring. So this gives us just a snapshot of how our students are doing as a class average. It is set up by your class and your course. I'll go back and show you that briefly. So this is my sample course right here. I can also go to reports and look at my students. There are standard reports too that we can compare against learning outcomes. So this is one opportunity for me to use a technology tool or a learning platform to help me collect data, but then also interpret that data and make better informed decisions for my instruction. So I can either have different initial instruction the second time, or I can change my instruction currently. So with that, I'm going to pause for just a moment. I'm going to see what questions you have about Ignite, about the platform, about collecting data. Go ahead and drop them in that question box. I have a few of my awesome colleagues that are in the back channel that are also helping to answer questions. Let's see. So I don't see any questions come in, but it takes just a moment for questions to populate. All right, so with that, I'm going to jump back to our slide deck. And let's start putting some pieces together and just reflecting on what we've done so far. So the resources that we use today, so these are usually a little more heavy on professional development, instructional strategies, instructional practices. Today, we did focus on some of the data from some of the research about data, but we did use the tool Mentimeter, and that very first strategy we used was called Tell Me Everything. That's where you get to tell me how you use data in your classroom, whatever you want. Some of the research from today, the K20 Learn website has over 200 free instructional strategies. Highly recommend that site. The research from LSU was called How Educators Can Use Student Data to Drive Instruction. That is some great research. And then we highlighted the GW platform today. Also, if you want more information on Ignite and you just want to try it out, see what it looks like, scan the QR code, or you can click on the link, and I'll drop the link in the chat as well. And what you'll notice is it's just a website to provide some more information for you. I'll give you just a second to scan that QR code. All right. Then, as some reminders as we start to reflect, certificates for this recording will be sent out 24 hours after the webinar to the email that you registered with today. Check your spam folder. Sometimes GoToWebinar goes to your spam folder. Also, there are blank certificates attached in the handout section today, so you can just go ahead and click on that handout section and download a blank one. You'll just need to fill in your name for that. And then at the very end, there will be an evaluation. We'd love some feedback. It's also a great place to type in some questions that you have. If you don't get them answered here, one of our educational consultants can definitely follow up with you after the webinar. If you like professional development or are interested in more professional development, scan that QR code. You can also check the link that's in the chat box right now. And then with that, we are going to take questions about using student data, Ignite textbook, etc. Then also I have two of my colleagues who can answer some questions as well. So the first one says, which textbooks are currently available? We currently have 3 that are in my demo account: the Culinary Professional, Maintenance, Light Repair, and Medical Terminology, but there are more coming out every day, it seems like. So Kristen, if you'll just email me or either scan that QR code or click on the link for the Ignite platform, you can request more information about that. If we purchase books from GW Learning, do we have access to the Ignite platform already? It depends on which titles you have purchased. And once again, feel free to reach out to me or click on that Ignite link that's in the chat, Jeffrey, and they can follow up with you as well, or I am happy to follow up with you to make sure you get all your questions answered about the platform. So I don't see more questions coming in the chat box. If you have questions, I'll hang out for just a couple more minutes. If you have questions about using student data, or if you have questions about Ignite, we're happy to answer those. With that, I hope you are, I cut off the one thing when I was copying and pasting. Thank you for letting me know, Tracy. Let's try that one for the PD website. I cut off one of the W's when I was copying and pasting. Anyways, we are super glad you decided to spend 25 minutes with us today. Hope you have a great day. Hope you learned something new about student data or reminded about something that you once knew that you forgot, and that you're happy to work with that student data again. Hope you have a super afternoon, and then we'll see you again on March 3rd, where we're going to talk about thanking routines in the classroom and using student voice. So have a super afternoon, and we will see y'all soon.